Oh crap! What's up, Tony?
All right, how's it going? Pretty
Good. Good
good.
to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
We're here in Philadelphia, and Tony, are you in New York still?
I am still in New York. Yep.
Damn. Well, gotta hang out in person at some point. Thanks for
Yeah,
making
yeah,
time to jump on the stream today.
yeah. You guys got to make it back. I got to come down to Philly
You gotta
sometimes.
come to
You know?
Philly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We'll be in New York actually in like 2 weeks, I think. So we'll be there.
Are you guys coming to
Um,
Bix or?
no, no, no. We have a
Okay,
wedding and we have other stuff, but we'll be in and
gotcha.
out all spring. We love both cities. If you're listening to this or watching this, wherever you are, we love your city too. I don't know. I just happen to live in on the East Coast. Hey, I'm Wythe. I make games at Stillfleet Studio and invited my friend Tony Chao to join us to talk about his comic. Tony's an illustrator, among other things. And we were going to talk about indie comics and RPGs,
Cool.
and specifically one comic that I really like that Tony did that has a few things. It's cool post-apocalyptic comic. Tony's going to say a lot more about it, but it doesn't have words even.
Nope.
But it does have sort of a dope landscape and vibe, and it feels to me when I read it like an adventure. So Tony and I were talking over, over drinks 6 months ago or something. What if this was a game? And finally, here we are, and this is actually the kickoff of hopefully what will be sort of a series, which we're just calling for now "Why We Work," where we have on different artists. Doesn't have to be comics; could be anybody, but folks who want to talk about making games and make games with us. Us being, maybe myself, maybe uh, you know, Chris Pickett, Tony Grasso, somebody else that we work with who makes games. So, hey, we have folks in the chat. So, if you're in the
Oh,
chat and
sweet.
you have thoughts on making games, just say hi. And with that, I'm going to shut up and maybe, Tony, can you introduce yourself and HAZMATT? And then we'll kind of move into games from there. But first, just give people a lay of the land. And also, I think you might have some art to share with us.
So my name is Tony. I'm from Taiwan. Been living in the US for the past 20 odd years and went to school for illustration, later on visual narratives at SVA, and yeah, I've been drawing comics since about 2018, 2019. I mean, I grew up reading comics and then kind of went away from it. Thought I was going to try to do editorial illustration, and that didn't really work out. And I kind of got back into it in 2018 when I read some like Mobius comics, and that kind of, like Arzak, Inkall, that blew my mind. And I was like, oh, there's just a lot of possibilities in comics, especially like wordless comics like Arzak. And so I got back into it, and yeah, and I guess December of 2019 I created this character HAZMATT after just reading a bunch of Charles Bukowski poetry. Like they're like very depressing, and just talking about the end of the world. And I'm like, oh man, this like there's that one poem, it's like Dinosauria We, and it's like describing this like post-apocalyptic landscape. And I had this like image of like a figure in a hazmat suit in this like in like a ruined world, kind of like the movie The Road a little bit, that kind of world. And yeah, I started drawing it. I came up with the first like 8-page chapter, and then COVID hit. And so that felt really timely, and at as we are going through quarantine, I was like, all right, you know what? I think this is I I should continue with this. And yeah, and then 4 years, 6 years later, like here we are, like 4 books and um whole lot of adventures. And yeah, at the start it was kind of more episodic in a way. Um I kind of modeled it after like that Gendy Todorovsky show Primal a little bit. And it's there wasn't too much of a plot going on. It's kind of just, all right, you're following this guy, he's surviving the wasteland, and there's obstacles and creatures and robots and whatever. And as I start writing it, I start asking questions of like, who is he? Why is he in a mask? And who else is in this world, and they're not everything's completely just radiated. There's other like humans that are sentient, and yeah, and it just went from there, and here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. And yeah, as Vex points out, I hate when life imitates art about COVID. I feel like we've had on a lot of creators on our show, Why We Roll, to talk about indie RPGs, and a lot of people had that moment in around the pandemic, with the peak of lockdown in the U.S. at
Yeah.
least, and elsewhere, where people were not going anywhere and thinking about worlds ending and new worlds beginning, which is traditionally apocalypse means kind of a revelation about a new world. So it actually implies that something else that comes. And I think
Mm.
Hazmat, to your point, has developed in that direction where it's not just that the old world has crumbled and it feels like Mad Max or The Road, a Cormac McCarthy novel. It also feels like there's some new weird psychedelic, kind of Morbius, Arzak level fantasy stuff happening. There's some giant animals. It's really good. It works even if you didn't, even if you like. It doesn't matter what language you would read, right? Because the comic doesn't have words, so it's actually
Right.
really smart too to kind of plot it through the lens of this person who's on this journey. You don't know where they're going, and you, the creator, actually don't know where they're going. So I think that's fun that you started with an image, guy in a hazmat suit on a
Yeah.
bike, and then each piece is like he's getting a thing, he's doing a thing, he's interacting with a person, and that really motivates a chunk of a graphic novel. So it's cool that you have there are four sort of half-size graphic novels, so it's like it's a good amount of pages at this point, but
Yeah, it's
they're sort
about
of
448, 45 to 50 page books, so it's about like 200 now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I know you have more in the works. Is that right? So there's more to the story.
There is more. I took a little break from it after book 4 because it kind of was like sort of a stopping point. Like I left off in sort of a cliffhanger, and I was like, man, I'm a little hazmatted out, and and then like I went back to work on my other graphic novel, Metabo. That was also my like grad school thesis. I was like working on the second issue, which is almost done. I got
Cool, cool.
3 pages left to ink, and then I'm done with that, and I'm ready to do the covers and put it together.
Nice, and
So
that's like cyberpunk, right? Kind of. I mean, it's a lot of your work has science fictional elements, and there's some fun play with aspects of modernity, urban
yeah,
life, things some cross cutting themes I see. But Metabo definitely feels like a cyberpunk dystopian.
yes, yeah,
You're jacking into the sort of
the
matrix.
virtual maze, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's
yeah,
mazes, right? It's very beautiful in that sense.
yep,
So it's cool to see indie comics, and I don't read enough of them, but I do read yours since I know you, and I do think there's a lot that aligns indie comics and RPGs because they're about storytelling and from the indie perspective, and especially you're doing the bookmaking, right? You're like doing the whole thing and sending it off to
yep,
print and having to sell it, so you feel where we're coming from sometimes on this show, talking to folks who are doing a Kickstarter, printing 500 copies of a zine, whatever it is, trying to sell it.
yeah. It's very similar experience. Yeah,
Yeah, so that made me think like, man, if you like, I know this comic doesn't have words. I'm not trying to put words in your comic, but I do think it'd be
yeah,
cool if you wanted to play in this world and have these psychedelic reference points. Not that there aren't other apocalyptic games. I've often said, I was really inspired. There's one called Apocalypse World that's really big in our little, non D&D role playing game landscape, and it is a good game.
I didn't check
And
it out. Yeah,
yeah, the third edition just came out actually, but there's many others. I will say Vex has a game again in the chat. Another amazing designer has a game called Ashfall that's really fun. It's about kind of facing, I don't know, badly paraphrase Vex's very interesting game, but different kinds of disasters as a group and kind of playing through different aspects of them, where you're a player, but you're also controlling, the plot in a way that's broken up.
mm,
So that's something we can talk about too, Tony. So there's a lot to cover
yeah, for
from if
sure.
your main reference point for tabletop gaming of this kind is D&D, which is very much the traditional,
Yeah, and
we
I've played it like once. Like
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was like because I didn't really grow up playing role playing games. Like I don't even play video games that much, to be honest. But yeah, we had one in our grad school for visual narratives. We had one act like a character studies acting. It's not an acting class, but it was like a character writing class, and I guess as an exercise to help us get into our characters for a thesis, we played a game, like we played a D&D game, and
Oh, nice.
that was
For
interesting. I
class,
like,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I dressed up in a hazmat suit and everything. It was hilarious.
Oh, there you go. So you're
Yeah,
already so you're feeling it. So again,
yeah,
this is a thing in these games. Post apocalypse is Definitely, 100%. It's like a lot of earlier video games, like Final Fantasy. There's a lot of these games that have a post-apocalypse almost built in, where like the world will change as the player is playing it, or you're told the world is dying and you're supposed to save it, or bring it back to some earlier state,
Mm,
whatever it is. Which of course these narratives, they're not inherently liberatory. I would just say the idea of like, oh, it used to be better. That's I'm always suspicious of that. But I will say in this moment, feels like we're in this dying empire. It's been on the decline. You can easily imagine a lot of endings that are bad. So
yeah,
not saying Hazmat is particularly talking about any specific situation. It's really, again, there's no words. It's hard to tell where we are.
right.
But it definitely feels, as you said, it's of this kind of post-COVID malaise moment. Hey, what's up, Taylor, in the chat? Thanks for tuning in. So the game we're making, I think, might be a hazmat game, and I think Tony, this would be a good time to talk about that. I will say before we get too far into kind of what kind of game you want to make and how that
Mm.
relates to themes you want to highlight in your storytelling, do you want to show some pictures to folks who may not have seen your comic?
Yeah,
Because
for
we can
sure.
share.
I got the books here with me.
Oh, okay, yeah. You
Yeah,
just
yeah. Um, so yeah, here's the first issue of the comic. Um, I guess I had this cover drawn out in like 2020, and I'm just gonna flip through them. That's the best way to do it. But
yeah, we're going old school.
yeah, I mean, I can share screen, but this is I don't know. I feel like this is cooler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
can post links. I mean, everyone should follow Tony on Instagram. That's an easy way, right, to see a lot of your art as well. So
yeah. So I don't know. Opened the page and like in like just like a deserted wasteland. There's a rat, and rat's been pretty prevalent in all my comics, for the most part. Like the very first comic I made is called Ratman, and it's about a homeless guy in New York. So you can read that somewhere. And but yeah, and you're introduced to this masked figure that I didn't want to give too much of like a introduction of who he is, but I feel like you got to follow his actions to kind of find out what his characters are. And the first chapter kind of goes through him trying to survive on rat juice, hates it, and he finds his deer that he later finds out the deer is a mother, and he Hazmat felt bad and he couldn't do it, and he ends up turning away and riding off to survive somewhere else, and so I don't know, like I kind of thought of that first little chapter as like that like hug the cat moment they say in writing of like you're trying to humanize the character. And I wanted, because in the past I've always written like a lot of anti-heroes that are not bad guys but not necessarily good guys. And I don't know, I felt like at the time it felt so bleak. Hazmat needed to be like a hero,
yeah, yeah.
like
Which I think becomes ambivalent without giving anything away as you read. It's less
yeah,
clear, but he definitely comes off early as like he's a survivor, but he's also like not a jerk, and
yeah,
that's
he's a
something that sort of comes up at least once per issue where he's making some kind of moral choice. So again, it feels like D&D in that sense too, where you're presented with like two opportunities: do you kill everyone and steal their stuff, or like leave them alone and go seek heroism elsewhere? Very classic adventure stuff, again,
right.
without words, done really well. There's a lot of nice surprising elements when you turn the page.
Yeah,
And that's something to consider too: how heroic or anti-heroic, how gritty and real versus inspiring. Like, do you want the game to be? And there's ways to sort of modulate what's in the game to like get at those feelings.
yeah. And oh, sorry, like
No, no, I was just gonna say there's a question in the chat.
no,
How did the color palette come about? It's sick.
the um it's a good question though. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of it's sort of random. I mean, I came up with his color is green just because it's like a little toxic feel. So the hazmat green, but I try to change up the color for each chapter. So the first chapter is like the red earth with the purple and orange, and as we go on with the next one, I change it up with every 8 pages, and it's a green and like a candy pink with a green hue and purple earth. So yeah, I just try to have fun with it, like, and there, there's not necessarily a rule. The only constant rule is that the characters may remain the same color, so readers don't get confused, like which one's hazmat and which one's which character. But everything else, I try to I try to just have fun with it, like
Yeah, yeah. No, and I love that. I also think I'm gonna write down in a second in our doc, brainstorming doc, color as something in the game because I think that's an underused element that I've seen a couple OSR games use where different, there's sort of different colored lasers that do different things, and there's a sort of consistency across the book of like a color actually has a game meaning,
yeah.
which D&D plays around with these sort of types like ice, fire, elemental
Mm.
types, death, life, things like that, that magic can be tagged as. But I think it's fun to do like, maybe there's items, maybe again, we can never use this, but it just comes up since color is obviously a big part of the book. Maybe the colors do have some actual like mechanical meaning, which the characters
Mm.
in the game wouldn't understand, but we, the players in the meta position, we get like why green is X or why pink is Y. When it comes to certain things.
Yeah.
Another question in the chat, which flows nicely into beginning to talk about games.
Cool.
I wonder if you see Hazmat as a solo game or more communal. So, Tony, you may again from your one experience playing D&D, you know that these games started as multiplayer games.
Yep.
There's a long tradition. There's many. This is not the time to get the history of gaming, but the traditional model has been there's one player who's the game manager who helps tell a story and referee rules, and then the other players are playing player characters. They have an avatar who is usually heroic or anti-heroic in some interesting way, sometimes extremely normal, rarely though, usually it's some twist because you don't want to just play yourself.
Yeah.
And they play together and they tell a story where they're a crew of heroes or pirates or whatever the fuck they are. But recently, solo games are really big. And the idea of solo games is to try to produce some of the same emotional experiences. But when you pick up a zine and you pull out a notebook, a lot of them have interesting elements like mapping. So, for example, you draw a map as you read
Mm.
through and you do different things. So, there's still rules and you're following the kind of sequence of events, but you ultimately are writing like a journal or drawing a picture or pulling out tarot cards. You're sort of telling yourself a story. So,
Yeah,
I
you're
think it'd be
writing your own story.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're writing your own story and you make like a document in the end, which you might share with friends. Maybe you could do it together. Maybe there's ways to have multiplayer games that have solo components. There's now a thing called duet games where you're meant to have it be played with two people. So like a couple can
Mm.
sit there and play through an experience from different angles. Sort of like the sort of Rashomon idea. You get two sides of a story, right?
Yeah.
And again, maybe one side is like, I'm all the rats underneath New York City and
Yeah.
you are playing Ratman, and player two
Yeah.
as Ratman is an unhoused person, and rat player one is all the rats, and they interact, right? And they have
Yeah. Yeah.
very different experiences. I'm just making this up, but great question from Taylor. How is it that you want to see Hazmat? In my mind, this would be great for a low-power adventure game, but I actually could see it going both ways, where maybe you do play solo or there's some component where you could have more players enter but it's not assumed that you're a party of badasses. I don't know if you have any instant thoughts on that, but it's a great question.
Um, I think my first instinct would have been to be more of a solo game as you follow his journey, and I guess in the comic there's like it's building towards him discovering why he can't take off the mask and why he's in the mask and who he is, and the I guess that's the direction. And I I, I mean I'm not too familiar with how board games would work, but I would kind of like lean towards it's kind of a you're figuring out his mystery type of situation, and maybe other players are either as antagonists or support, or their decisions influence his path. uh, i- if that makes sense, like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these are interesting questions from a very basic level of in a lot of games you don't play as a specific person, you play as your own character you make up and that's a part of the game, character
mm,
creation. and then you can make anyone, right? So you're like, I'm Sir Tony the knight, or I am uh, baby grandma the wizard, and those are all valid characters in D&D, or a lot of the games we make. But in this game, you could play as like you're a specific person. We don't know a lot about him, so
Yeah.
it's still mysterious, and you still embody that person, whether you're acting it out with other players or you're writing it down in a journal. You make up the details, right? But you are
Yeah.
told like, okay, you're this person, roughly such and such, physique, and in such and such a situation. So that would be a different take. I do like the idea that you said maybe other players enter, but they're always messing with this guy, on a
Yeah.
journey. It reminds me actually, Vex in the chat is a game a little like this, Fleetling. And I want to speak out of turn for Vex, but I know there's some elements like that where someone's on a journey and other players are kind of adding, I don't want to say obstacles, but like wrinkles to that story.
Right.
So I think that actually, again, could be a format that you want to explore. So we could do different versions too. We could have a rule set that works in terms of rolling any dice or like resolving conflicts. You could have a system that works for solo, works for duet, works for multiplayer. And then ultimately, what is the right or normal way to play, quote unquote, according to the rules? We could decide. We could even try them all out.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big question, actually.
Yeah. Because I was thinking like there are other like not hazmat characters, but there are other like there's the dog, there's the girl, there's like the cannibal guy that comes in later, and he's like he has his and you kind of in the comic we kind of see things through his perspective for a bit. So and the dude's kind of a piece of shit, but but that though I feel like those could be playable characters and that could go somewhere. I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, also it's like again, those are also specific elements in the comics. Do you also think, yeah, are we talking about pre-gens to get you started, or is it always you're playing through, one or more of their stories? I think of the movie Weapons. I don't know if you saw that, which has the different perspectives as it cuts around. I forget the filmmaker's name, but he does that in his movies. But I think it would be cool to also at least put on the table playing as types, like the type of person who's a survivalist, the type of person
Yeah,
who's a mutant cannibal. I
that'd be
actually
cool
think it'd
too.
be
Yeah,
fun to
yeah,
have Dog.
that would
Like
be cool. Yeah,
Dog as a playbook is great. I think that's rad, and I think like you could totally have like you're trying to survive in the wild that's radiated, and you're a dog, and like you
right.
have interesting shit happen. You don't necessarily need a name to play that character, right?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah. You're
so
just dog.
yeah, you're
Yeah,
just a dog, and then maybe, and like you said, maybe there's interactions. Maybe actually each time you play, you do try out different character types, and they don't like die or go away. They're all around, right?
yeah. I mean, now that you say that, it's like, I mean, maybe there's just you get like a list. You don't necessarily even have to be hazmat. Like, there's like 8 different characters in the game that you can choose from. You start their journey from their perspective, and maybe they intersect with hazmat, maybe they don't, and maybe they have their own journey in this wasteland in this world, and somehow they all have their stories that they gotta complete in a way, like
Yeah, yeah. I think so. We're getting in the chat a lot of agreement that uh, you can basically have different characters that you start from and play through, and they have very different. It's called asymmetry in game design. They have different things they
ah,
can do, so they're not all using the same rules necessarily in the same way, or they're using the same rules but they're just doing really different things with them. There's a couple cool games. There's one I can send you. This is a pretty light game, and we could play it. It's fun, called The Very Good Dogs of Chernobyl. That's about
mm,
dogs in Chernobyl, and they have different scores, but the scores mean like some of them have high dice and large dice, some have low dice, large dice and small dice. So they can get large numbers or small numbers, but that's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a style thing. It's like the
mm.
old dog is not very strong, but the old dog is like really keen at tracking, that kind of a thing.
Right, it's got
Um,
experience and whatnot.
yeah,
Yeah.
so like you're likely to roll a low number, but that doesn't mean you failed in general. That means you can't usually beat up someone. You need help with that, but you're good at like you're smart because you're whatever. So I'm paraphrasing it, but that's a system that there's a kind of asymmetric system that does use dice like D&D,
Mm.
but there isn't the sense that you pass fail. It's more how do you do a thing, and are you able to do a thing a certain way. So if you can't get a certain number, you can't do it that way. You'd have to think of another way to do it, right?
Mm.
So I think that would be one way to have like use some version of the systems that we like or think are robust, but also have asymmetry and have different kinds of characters who explore the same world. I think would be to me important there is the world is symmetric, and then the characters participate in it asymmetrically. So
I think
it
yeah,
it feels like an intro because the world feels like a character. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And the
yep.
kind of psychedelic, in
I
this
agree
case,
with that.
post-apocalyptic, but the low fantasy of Arzak, it feels like the sucking sea or whatever. The when he flies over the like what looks like grass, and you realize the grass are these horrible green pseudopods trying to
Yeah, yeah,
drag him
yeah,
down.
yeah.
So I feel
And
like this has
he
that
fucks
vibe.
over that
He,
that little ape looking
yeah,
guy. Yeah,
yeah. So I want to make sure that there's elements that are. So I mean, to me, that's important. That the world of Hazmat feels dangerous and interesting. But I love this idea of kind of asymmetric playbooks and different ways to explore that world. Um, let's talk about complexity. We talked a little before we started about D&D versus games that are kind of rules light. Do you have a sense? It feels to me like a comic with no words, where the plot
Mm.
is very much a product of art and your intuition, and it's not like something you've mapped out screenplay style. Um, should be maybe lower complexity. But do you have any deep thoughts on kind of how the game should work? Like, for example, some games use dice only, some use cards, playing cards, or tarot cards. Some have a lot of scores, like attributes you keep track of, and some have very
Mm.
few. There's really a huge range now, and a lot of these games are fun, depending on you can take them in different directions, but they produce really different kinds of experiences when you add more and more and more rules versus kind of I want to keep it simple. Any thoughts on that question, like the solo multiplayer question?
Uh, oh man, that's hard. For some reason, I'm just thinking Monopoly right now, but yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think my intuition would be like, let's not make it too complex, and where you have to do a bunch of math and all that to like make this game work. Something a little bit more straightforward, more story driven, rather than like I don't know. There's a bunch of like mathematical calculations and whatnot. Um, I guess that's my first intuition, but yeah, I have to give it some thought. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, no, I think it's something we can come back to. So it's not like a right or wrong or you need an answer right now. Just putting on the table, kind of like the solo, like how many people are experiencing Hazmat as this kind of a game at a time.
mm,
We're getting some great thoughts in the chat. Shout out to Visceral Codex. So different playbooks up against random events in the Waste is a good start for a solo game, and leaning into isolation, bizarre narrative, the comics, and getting the silent comic feel from the rules, right? So that
yeah,
makes that again would match the comic more, where there isn't dialogue. People have interactions, and you can tell they're interacting, but the comic does not give you any words. We don't know if Hazmat and unnamed, slightly more femme-coded other survivalists are talking or just hanging out, and the dog same with the dog.
mm,
So I think that's interesting if it's not a game that asks you to keep track of a lot of rules. But yeah, we can come back to that. So just putting out
yeah,
there that like common things, these are not the only ones by far. There's a couple game designers who have interesting thoughts on non-dice mechanics, but dice, playing cards, tarot cards, dominoes, drawing as a mechanic.
yeah. Could there be like scenario cards? Like, is that a thing? You flip and then you see like an image of like a scenario, and you decide what you do with that, or I don't know. Like it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Cards are
is
big,
that a
and
thing?
people make specific cards for games now. That's a big piece
Yeah,
of
and you don't need words for that. Like it's just how you interpret an image, basically. And
yeah, yeah, like code names or code words. That kind of Rorschach approach. You just see an
mm,
image and you have to decide. That is essentially how tarot is used in a lot of games. So tarot is, I don't know if you know much about tarot cards, but they have different images,
yeah,
and they're typed a bit, but they're kind of can be random, and different decks have different images on purpose. So depending on the deck you use, you might tell a different story.
right, right.
And there's a few different games that have kind of their own version, but they come with that. The simplest way in the tradition of traditional kind of pen and paper tabletop role playing games is to write the things you're describing as lists, So you'd roll a die and you get a random list. So let's say you have a list of D10, so a 10-sided dice,
Mm,
strange things that can happen in the desert, and
mm,
you write it down. But there's lots of different ways to do it. You can pull cards, and you can, I'm sure, come up with many other ways besides. I like where you're going with maybe you chop up images from the comic into little cards, right? And
right.
then that is a little different to produce because you wouldn't just necessarily be printing a zine, although you could just print them as things that the player is meant to photocopy and cut out themselves, etc.
Yeah, they have to do some
Um,
arts and craft themselves.
a little bit, yeah. So I
Yeah,
mean, or you can just sell them, and again, making cards isn't the most expensive thing, but it does. So some of it is also this is getting into what's called product design. So it's kind of like,
yeah,
oh, are we imagining this as one small book? That's it, or is it a small book that has other paraphernalia?
right.
But yeah, I like that thought. So definitely don't we can definitely do that, and it's something to come back to in terms of essentially how do we do randomization? How do we bring the world to life? Because again, my
Yeah,
tradition is you write lists of stuff and then you roll on those lists and you link them together in what's called a generator, like if this then that statement. So if you're in this situation, you roll on this list. If you're in this situation, you roll on this list.
mm.
Maybe your powers let you change the roll even.
So you
But
kind
I
of
think
map out like a little decision tree type of situation. Like,
that's how a lot of adventure writing, how a lot of game design goes in the tradition of kind
gotcha.
of taking the old school D&D stuff and breaking it down, making it new. But I do really I like playing cards a lot. I like playing
Yeah,
card games. I like tarot. And those are things we've been using more and more in our games in terms of just
and I
there's
just think they'd be
different.
cool as collectibles. Like it's
Well,
yeah,
obviously, yeah, it'd be dope. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, I'm a fan. There's a few games. Blister Critters, actually, one of our games comes with NPCs. There's 48 cards where you pull them out, and they're the different critters and beasts you can encounter. And they're really good because they each have two powers. They have the stats at the top, so they're very fast. They give you a sense of the game. And then games like there's a big game called Daggerheart now that's like a D&D style game where all your powers are cards. So you do a
Uh,
loadout. You have more powers. Like let's say you start with like 7 and you pick 4. And so of 7 cards, you pick 4 of them in your hand and you can use those during the game. This again would be different. This might be a way to like break out the world into random elements. But again,
yeah.
as some people have said in the chat, you can do it. You can do it a different way, right? Which is essentially you could have cards that you photocopy, cut out, back of the book, whatever.
Mm,
You could have cards they have to buy that are nice looking. You could have both, frankly. So there's like a kind of
yeah,
cheaper option and then the
right.
nicer option that costs another $10 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And as Vex points out, Gloomhaven has this. So there's a number which is a big board game that's almost like an RPG, but it's not ultimately. It's about armies fighting, but it's kind of you have a character and a character sheet and there's cards. There's a lot of deck builder style card games now that are like this, where you make your character and you add items and you sort of draw. When you go into a situation, you might have a certain number of cards in your hand. So you could design the whole thing around cards. Actually,
Yeah.
there are a couple of games like this. There's one called Atma that is an RPG that's entirely cards. It is totally up to you. I mean, again, you don't have to decide now. Just putting out there that the format, the product design is another piece. Kind of like how complex, how many players.
Mm,
They all sort of relate to these high level decisions.
sure.
Let's move on. Let me throw out another big question. You're just throwing it all at you, Tony.
All right. Yeah, I'm
You
here
can
for
handle
it.
it. All right.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
Power level. What kinds of characters are we thinking about? It sounds like maybe different kinds is what I'm hearing. So
Yeah.
maybe it's not just human survivalists in the waste. It's also like a dog or like a mutant cannibal guy who's pretty messed up. But we've all seen, especially the recent Mad Maxes, have to some different degree humanize these characters a bit. At least they show that like they are products of a structure and they are
Yeah.
messed up, but like they didn't necessarily choose that life.
Yeah.
How much do you want to give this person things to do in the game? So power level I think could have a couple meanings. One being, just how much stuff is on their sheet. How much stuff does a character have to keep track of?
Mm,
When I broke down the comic, I think I showed you in this Google Doc,
yeah.
where we're taking notes. I broke it down into just random items. I found 20 random items across the 4 graphic novels
Yeah.
that a character. So I made a list of a D20 list. So you roll a D20 and they get an item, right? Just to start,
Yeah.
just to have ideas, and then encounters. And I found a little fewer than 20, but different things that HAZMATT like meets and is either good, bad, just like a weird thing. Like one of them I wrote down caves and holes, in addition
Right.
to like giant birds, spiders, rats, there's always rats.
There's
Bikers,
always
biker
rats.
gangs, yeah. So like caves isn't necessarily a monster that gets you. It's just like there's a point where like he has to go and like there's a cave system, and I
Right,
think
right.
these are all elements that we could consider. But in terms of power, I'm curious if you have thoughts on like do you want to have a game where people get cool powers? Do you want them to feel more like real normal people? Not that I mean people are amazing, obviously, but you
Yeah.
know how much is this a super powerful kind of power fantasy versus normcore low fantasy people versus something else entirely in some mix?
I'm leaning more towards like low fantasy, like less power. Like there's, you know, like Hazmat had himself has some supernatural elements, but nothing like I don't envision him as someone with like, you know, like like a Superman, you know, like or you know what I mean, like or but you know, most creatures like obviously if you get like a robot, it's a little more durable than like a mutant, you know, because it's made of metal or whatever. But or whatever it's made of. But um, yeah, I I feel like the power will come from like equipments that they encounter or like scenarios and items that they pick up, and more than like oh you get whatever magical powers, you know, like
Yeah, I like that a lot. I actually was thinking like our base system that we use for the three games our studios published with another three or something to come out. You know, uses different die types, and you're usually rolling one, and you might be adding. So basically, the core thing is like you're rolling the score has a dice that's associated with it. So whatever you're really good at might be a D12, and
mm,
you're if you're not as good at something, it might be like a D6, and there's dice in between. And then you might be adding a small bonus if you're good at something that's
yeah,
on your character sheet. So depending on the game, you might have advantage, meaning you roll twice and you pick the better result.
yeah,
Or you might burn grit. So one of the key things across the games is you can expend energy. You have a limited amount of grit. You're just kind of like MacGuffin, like energy, focus, whatever, and you
yeah,
can
yeah.
burn it to raise the result because you want to hit a number, right?
Mm,
But I was thinking, actually, reading Hazmat again, how much the importance of items and the fact in the waste. If his bike breaks down, if he can't find food, every item, like every single item
right.
counts.
Yeah.
What if every item was just like an additional die you got and you use it and it goes away, or you use it and when it gets a one, it goes away? So it's, you know, it's something that lasts for a while but unpredictably because it might break. You
Right.
might
Yeah.
run out
Yeah.
of the food's spoiled. We actually, Gay and I were watching the show Alone. I don't know if you this dumbass show about guys who go
I,
out and live in the woods alone.
I haven't seen
Um,
it.
it's a survival competition show, and but it really highlights the same thing. It's like you get 10 items to start, and they drop you off
Yeah.
in the middle of the Canadian wilderness, and that's it. And you have to live there,
Yeah.
and it's whoever lasts longest. And they go for like 3 months, like usually.
Jesus.
So it gets brutal because winter comes and it's bad. So
Say naked and afraid, like.
it's like that, but less. This is like the serious. Like these people are like about that life. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
But it made me think of Hazmat actually because I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, every item. If you get a hammer, like if you're allowed to find whatever, they try to pick the most remote locations. But if you find a hammer, that's you get a hammer. So
Yeah.
like great. And then again, what if that hammer sucks and it's half broken? Whatever, like you don't have to use it,
Yeah.
or you can try to fix it. So I think there could be a lot of things. And you know, someone like in the chat, you know, we have items in other games that make your die type go up. So from a D6, you might get a D8, which is a little better. You know, mathematically, you're more likely to get a higher result, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you could have what's called degrading or improving dice, like something goes up or goes down
Hmm.
because of a situation. Again, items could represent that, and that'd be a simple way to keep track. Items give you more dice to roll or different dice or something like that. Again, they don't have to be dice at all. That's just again where my mind goes because I'm very dice build. That's what I do is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
fuck around with these little guys. So that's a question. So I agree. I agree with where you're headed. Not maybe too powerful, where there's a lot of powers to keep track of for one. So again, with
Yeah.
complexity, those things relate, and then also the world is dangerous. So if you don't have a lot of powers, you gotta think creatively, and it comes down to some core mechanic that you have to sort of succeed at, which could be again
Yeah.
narrative entirely. Like maybe it's not rolling dice, or that's only a small part of
'Cause,
it.
like, I feel like each character starts out with like a handful of items, and they, and I feel like you start out with like a handful of skills. Like it's like say the girl starts out with this crossbow, she's probably pretty good at it, but if she gets like a freaking hammer, she probably can't use it, you know, like, and same with a dog. Well, hammer's useless for a dog, you know, like, whereas like, it might be pretty good for hazmat. And so I guess you have different, I guess, ability charts, and like you get like a spectrum of that, and with each item they might enhance certain abilities, and or just be totally useless, and you might discard that or something, you know, like, so
Yeah, no, I think that that's one way to do it that would be
yeah,
fun is like give every item something useful, but then also give it a tag maybe. So it's like items that have the tag food,
yeah,
a survivalist can use, a mutant can use, or a dog can use. But the dog
yeah,
can't
yeah, yeah,
use the tools because the tools don't have food,
yeah,
as a
yeah,
tag. So the dog is just, moving it around. If you're creative, you might be able to use it in some way, but you can't use it in the way that is written in terms of like, let's say, for example, the hammer gives, upgrades, a die or gives you an extra d6 when you're rolling to do something, to make a repair, and the
yeah,
dog just
yeah,
doesn't gain that. Now the
right,
hammer's still there, so if the dog nudges it over and it falls down the hole and it hits the guy below him, then that's smart and that's
it,
creative, right?
right,
But
right, yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
give him the d6 to repair things because the dog doesn't repair shit. So I
right,
love that. If there's different pre-gens that are asymmetric, there's another game like this, a little bit called Troika, that is basically your characters are defined by these very silly lists of powers and items that are all very random and weird. The
hmm.
last time I played, I got a character called the Claviger, which means a key maker, who's just like covered in keys and has a big key and like can open locks, but that's kind of it. So like if you're
Like that key guy in the Matrix, like,
yeah, I played him as just like Nick Cage, coked out, like weird guy, but it was fun because it's like you're in a hotel situation with social combat mostly, like people are annoying in this fancy hotel in the book, the kind of starter adventure, but everyone has the good powers that have nothing to do with the situation, and that's the
hmm.
part of the game. It's meant to be chaotic. I don't think it's the best game for that reason. It's like very very random, but I love that we could do something like that here where you have cool skills. The dog is good at tracking or whatever, right?
Yeah,
But it isn't always helpful because in that
yeah.
moment, that won't help you out of the situation. You're locked in a cage. Your dog. How do I get out of this cage? So I think,
And I guess you can be pretty creative with how you use all their special powers, and in certain situations it might not be apparent, but
yeah,
certain skills they have might come in handy in like very niche situations, you know, like,
it would actually be fun. Like I'm thinking of this choose your own adventure multi pre-gen thing where they're asymmetric. Like let's say the dog, you're playing the dog, you love the dog, and you get locked in a cage and you're fucked. You actually have to stop playing the game and go back and start from the perspective of the survivalist or the mutant cannibal. And then you could go save the dog, but like you'd have to get to that situation, you know what I mean? And maybe
yeah, okay,
I don't
yeah,
like I don't you know what I mean? And then you could let them out and you could continue playing as dog. So you could
right.
almost have a plot that like requires you sometimes to branch, or doesn't require, but you could get in a situation where you need to backtrack and like what
Like you're
else is
stuck.
going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, which is a little different than a heroic adventure with a well-told tale arc of like climax and emotional catharsis. This is like, no, you're just a dog stuck in a cage. The
yeah, yeah.
cannibals caught you. I don't know. Um,
So you blew
you
it.
blew it for now. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
gotta get
yeah,
out. Yeah, you could start
yeah.
over. I don't know. So, so the next question, we talked about this a little. We talked about avatar, meaning who do you play if you're
Mm,
playing anyone? You could play the world. Again, in Monopoly, you don't really play as the hat or the terrier. You're an abstract capitalist, right? The hat and the terrier are icons.
yeah, yeah,
But in most of these games that we make, you play as a person, and the person can be very wild, a robot, and alien, but you're somebody. You have a story. Who lives in this universe was the next question. So I think that we'll just take them together as we kind of talked about this a little. Who does live in Hazmat? I've read these four graphic novels. I don't totally know that I know the answer. I think maybe no one does but you. And it sounds like Tony, you don't always, you're holding back some yourself. So
I have part of the answers, and then the rest
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
them.
Well,
Yeah,
without you don't have to spoil yourself at all, but like how
yeah,
much can you say who like to me, I would like that's how I classify it. There's mutant survival or there's survivalists, like humans who seem more human but they have gas mess on. There's mutant
yeah,
cannibals, very Mad Max troped, but you draw them, they're all unique looking and stuff.
yeah.
There's dogs, birds, things like that. Mostly wasteland, but there's definitely beasts. So I think there's sort of three categories that I see. But I'm very curious from your perspective, like who is out here that we might either play as, encounter in the game, somehow want to make rules about.
Yeah, like you said, there are survivalists. There's like the girl in the comic, Hazmat himself. they're still sentient for the most part. And then that cannibal, he's survivalist. And I had a I mean, I wrote him like he I guess he's a mercenary who works at this like Sclav town. It's like a slave town, like somewhere. So I was for future books. I'm planning on like kind of like like in Mad Max Thunderdome, like the what's that town called? In I forgot, but there's like more survivalists and warlords and whatnot.
Yeah,
Um,
Bartertown is Thunderdome.
Bartertown,
I was gonna
yeah,
say it's not Gastown. There's a bunch of great ones in the new
yeah,
ones as
yeah.
well, but there's all the little horrible like warlord despot towns. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's that, and there's like the mutants that are, in my mind, they're kind of like former humans that are so radiated out that they've kind of lost their humanities, and maybe they're like the infected in like 28 Days Later. Like they're they operate on base instinct. Um, they're maybe a little stronger because they're just a little fucked up, but and then there's like the animals that for some reason, maybe because of radiation, they become extra big and extra crazy. And I think there's one more where there's like the robots. There's like these robots that are. I'm gonna be honest, I don't quite know what to do with them yet, but but when I drew them, I just thought, oh, it'd be cool to draw robots. But
Well,
um,
it makes sense because it's near future. There's a science fictional element, like in a lot of your work, where it's implied that technology got maybe further than it has IRL, and that's partially linked to the downfall. And again, I don't want to spoil anything. I actually don't know totally, but it's implied that there is, which is pretty typical, right? In a lot of apocalyptic literature, something goes wrong with a science thing, and we don't know exactly. Like we don't know if it's radiation. We don't totally know the nature. It feels like that vibe. Like you need a gas mask.
yeah,
You have to worry about potability of water. Can I eat this food? But also there are beasts and things out there, and Hazmat does sometimes rough it and just say fuck it and eat something. So I think it's interesting to think about the robots being like a faction or play or a group you haven't considered.
yeah,
That again, maybe the game. This is where these things like bifurcate. Like the game gets ahead of the comic in that sense. Like maybe you flesh out the robots thinking about the game and has nothing to do with the comic. That's
yeah,
fine. Like I'm not. I mean, that's totally you as an artist making a decision either way. But that is nice that you said four things, right? Survivalists,
yeah.
beasts, mutants, and robots, because that gives us four. You pick one of those four
Like
things, and then
class,
that's
I
your,
guess. Yeah,
or like yeah, even like a playbook. There's some difference there, but we can loosely just say there's four types of things that are moving around doing stuff, right? And they have,
mm,
to your point, different advantages and disadvantages. I imagine mutants more immune to the environment, but they
yeah,
still have to eat. Maybe they even have to eat less, but they're probably not as good at like using tools or they're maybe
right,
self control, determination, some of the things that classically human heroes are coded, like in the road, right? Or Mad
yeah.
Max, it's just being,
But they come in
kind of having
hordes,
spirit.
like yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Beasts similarly maybe stronger in certain ways, but also like can't use technology.
yeah,
Robots good at technology. Maybe they require some sort of energy or power that's there's a limit. So there's ways to
yeah,
sort of, if we did care about mechanical balance, meaning making things kind of equal enough where they don't feel like there's a good or bad option. It's just there's four options. We
right.
could try to figure out those axes. You know what I mean? And make, if you're good at A, you're not as good at B, and if you're good at C, you know what I mean? So you have three axes, and that's enough to kind of have four things balanced. We
Mm,
also don't have to do that, but putting out there that power is also related to avatar or type of thing. Um, so anything else you want to say about like, yeah, humans as batteries, classic idea, right? There you go, blood bags, all
mm,
that stuff.
yeah.
Anything else about the world that we should know that we haven't covered, just out of curiosity?
Um, I've had this idea of this dark tower in this world that like
Hell yeah.
it's in there, like it appears in like the fourth book all the way in the end. In the comic, that's I guess in the end of book four, Hazmat's triggered, and that's what he needs to look for, and that's gonna answer a lot of questions for him. And yeah, maybe I don't have the details of the tower kind of figured out, but I think that's like a for me it's always like a cool focal point of like where everybody's headed, you know, like of like an
Yeah.
intersection um and maybe that holds like the answer type of like and I don't know why I just thought of you read like Yu Yu Hakusho like the
Uh,
manga like or the
yeah,
anime.
is that, I think I've seen some of the anime. Is that the one where they go to hell and fight demons and stuff? I'm trying to think of it.
Part of it, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I've seen some of that.
there was one arc. This is like pretty early on where they're like go into this tower and then fight these like four. Like they're trying to save someone and then they're going through the levels and fight like four different bosses basically. And yeah, and then like I just have this idea that like you know there's this final converging of like why this world is fucked up and these people that live in the or whatever not people I don't know what it is but something that's in this tower that's making this world go, you know, like
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a classic. This is like, now we're talking Bible Odysseus shit, right? You know, what I
yeah,
mean, this is
yeah,
like a
it's a trope for
Chaucer.
sure,
It's a trope,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I have to say, like Stephen King does this really well.
yeah.
In The Stand. I don't know if you've read The Stand, which is a great post-apocalyptic horror
You know,
book.
I started reading in COVID and I stopped. I was like, I'm
It's
sorry.
too close, yeah,
Yeah, I started getting like
yeah.
psychosomatic like symptoms. I'm like, yo, I can't do this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and as Taylor points out, we all love a tower on horizon. Don't know what that says about people, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's the tarot card, the tower, right? And it's also in like the Dark Tower by Stephen King that again has this inexorability, the idea that the protagonist can't avoid it. I actually think that would be a dope way to make a story game that is a little different than an open-ended adventure game where you're meant to gain levels and just like, I don't know, amass gold, help people, kill demons, whatever it is. You could have a game where you're meant to actually get somewhere. And people have
yeah,
mentioned in the chat like hex maps or something. There's ways to do this where you could play it, whether it's solo or there's other players. You're moving around a landscape. You're trying to get somewhere. Maybe you have to go somewhere, or no matter what, after a while, like if it's
you end up
randomized,
there.
you end
Yeah,
up there. So
yeah,
imagine you make hexes, and again, maybe these are all dope cards. Let's do the fully realized. It's still minimal, but it's Tony's big game, right? So there's a deck of cards, there's a cool hex thing, right? Maybe it's PvP, you're racing against players, or you're cooperating, or it's one solo player and you actually can inhabit. You can be sort of ensouled within each of these characters. The dog gets stuck. Okay, I have to go backtrack over here. I can't move the dog, but I can be the other
right.
survivalist.
Oh,
And
that's yeah.
so you could do it different ways, multiplayer, solo player. But you maybe have a thing where randomly you draw a card or you put down a hex and bam, it's the tower. And then
Mm,
you actually like have to go there, or it starts doing something bad that you just want to stop, right? Every round it does a thing that's bad. So some of
mm,
this gets into like mechanical, like is this more board gamey? You're tracking time that way. Is it solo game journaling and you stop and things have to keep getting darker? Or is it an open-ended theater of the mind adventure game where you're imagining stuff a certain way, and you now are being told, okay, imagine you see this thing in the distance. I do
mm.
think one of the things I will shout out again. Sorry, I'm referencing a lot of games, Tony, but this is we can talk about this later. I'm just for
Yeah,
myself. There's a game called Ultraviolet Grasslands. Like I have the first and second editions behind me. That has a similar thing where a lot of the locations they will say like this is the greatest thing that ever happened to this civilization thousands of years ago. Now it's gone. There's one last survivor. You can wake them up or whatever, and it'll have like a list. Like it'll literally randomize like what the people wanted or why they all died. Like, and it feels like it's this inversion where as a reader you're like, oh, this would not matter a lot to me as a first level caravaneer who's just trying to move west to sell stuff, but
mm,
it would matter a lot if you're like that mummy in the spaceship that crashed, a
yeah,
thousand
yeah.
years ago. So I think you could do something similar with the tower where it could be random. Like you don't have to decide and tell us, I the creator know the answer. You could make like a list. We could come up with ways to write lists where like this thing with this thing with this thing makes a weird fucking reason why the world died, and it's random every time. It's just something to consider, that vibe of like, is it a big secret that's always one secret, or is it actually just kind of a stand-in, a psychological thing that, yeah, what does that say about people? To Taylor's point, that
Mm,
we all kind of get what you're saying with, okay, there's a big dark tower, I just have to go explore it, right?
yeah.
So something to think about, like if there is an end arc to the game versus it's open-ended. So that's again another kind of, there's a time element to decide with these games as well.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good question.
Yeah, and Vex points out like magic, like because we have magic, we have to go there. I mean, this is kind of like technology, right? Magic technology or psionics, the kind of Akira story, right? Like the new
Yeah,
flesh, the Cronenberg Otomo idea of like there's a new body, there's a new mind body that's being born, the new age, the turning of
yeah,
the great wheel of Dharma. That's a thing that you could explore too. Like again, apocalypses are revelations. So something has
yeah.
happened, something else has been revealed. So getting real philosophical. But those are all the things leading up to the core of like actually what are we going to design, which is game loops. So we're almost at an hour. I think
Mm,
we can wrap this into next steps. You tell me, Tony.
okay.
But another. So we've talked about a couple already. One would be character creation or selection or whatever. Who are you? And then another would be like building out the world. Is there like a play mat? Is there a board? What is it? Are you journaling? What are you doing? Um, but the main play loops, like in an adventure game, would be things like exploring, combat, resource management. And I was thinking again, we've even implied like maybe there's food that every character needs to eat. They need a certain amount per cycle. Is it per day? Maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe characters need different amounts. Robots don't need any.
Mm,
Cannibals need less. Beasts and humans need more. Again, these are all things to discuss, but the game loops would be sort of like what do you imagine players doing while they're playing the game? So those are, we don't have to decide now, but that's probably the biggest thing that we'll pick up on next time is like, are we fighting stuff? Are we journaling? Are we journaling about fighting stuff? Are we drawing a map? Are we drawing cards? Are we interacting in Barter Town, Gas Town, Bullet Town style encampments and doing social roles or like acting out stuff? Like there are games that model all of this, and I think one of the things to think about is how much you want Hazmat to feel as a game. Like, does it feel similar to a game where it's more philosophical and story driven, and there's not a lot of dice rolling or fighting? Do you want it to feel fighty? Comic feels pretty fighty to me. I,
yeah.
I like the fighting stuff,
I was like, I like
but
the fighting stuff
yeah.
too, so
All right.
I'm leaning towards that. You
Cool.
know, like yeah,
So then that's a game loop. So that's all just to
yeah,
note, like game loops that we know we want would be character creation and some kind of combat resolution system, meaning
right,
a giant spider attacks you as a survivalist, you and the dog. Either the spider's going to kill you and eat you and mummify you and you lose those characters, or you overcome the spider, right? Somebody wins. So
right.
there is an built-in stakes there. Those are all the things when we started to speed through. Those are like blah 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 blah, like game elements that we'd sort of talked about as things that we might want to decide at some point.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Tony. Can you say what do you think about just game? Thinking about this whole thing and making a game versus telling your stories, in words and mostly pictures. In the comic.
Actually, I could pause on that. I'm gonna use the bathroom real quick, and I'll come right back.
Oh hell yeah!
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Give
yeah.
me two
Let's do it.
seconds. Give me two
We're gonna
seconds.
do vamping. What's up, everyone in the chat? If you're enjoying today's random stream, which we're tell us, we'll do more of them. So yeah, and everyone, thanks again for everyone in the stream who's coming up with all kinds of great ideas, and I appreciate it. And I'm gonna guess Tony does as well. And just gonna show some of these. We're all addicted to math rock. Yeah, and if you're enjoying these, we've talked about a lot of other games, not just by us. So we talked about The Zone. That's another good one. Blades of the Dark, Blade 68. Gloomhaven, that's fine. For the Queen. So there's a lot of good games that are coming up in this discussion and in the chat that are really cool. And I will say in terms of asymmetric playbooks, again, we've shouted them out before, but Spencer Campbell's done some cool work with kind of asymmetry in adventure gaming, which I think is something I'd like to explore more. And maybe in a post-apocalyptic game is a good way to do that. So yeah, if everyone is enjoying the chat, let us know, and we will we will continue to talk about not only the grid system but all these other fine games by fine folks.
All right, I'm back.
All right, just doing a quick preview. These are not too many spoilers, but things from the most recent from number 4, which does end. I checked; it does say to be continued soon.
It does to be continued. Yeah, yeah, yes.
So there's a lot. I actually like. I will say again, you have a lot with balance of panels where you'll have like film strip style panels, and then you'll have these big spreads, and there is a nice kinetic movement to the comic. It does not feel super heroic. It has sometimes these nice like it feels cinematic to me more than super
Mm,
heroic. It feels like an artsy movie or
yeah,
anime, more than like the rules breaking kind of Marvel stuff, which can be fun and kinetic in a different way, but it to me cues up like a different world. It cues up that mythological nobody ever really dies. Like the stakes feel lower. Whereas
mm,
when you have those heavy black cinematic frames and you have regularity and then big establishing shots, it feels like a movie, which to me feels very dreamlike. So I like
yeah,
Hazmat in part because it's always felt like rereading it more recently. It's like it's very dreamlike when you read them all together. And the colors definitely the weird colors just kind of mess with you, and it's one of those dreams where like I don't know why everything is red. What does it mean?
yeah,
So with that, we're about an hour. So Tony, I want to turn over to you. Thoughts
yeah.
on it? Could be games, it could be anything. But what are you thinking? Uh, Rapid fire questions have come at you about games. Any thoughts? Any questions for me or the chat? Things you want to talk about next time?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's just pretty interesting that like, I work on it predominantly as um like a solo venture, like Hazmat, and it's I'm making the story, and now making it into a game, you're almost kind of turning it over to the players, and it's similar but different in that like you're creating something, a narrative, but you're not the one like as a creator of the comic, you're the player and the creator, like you're creating the characters and you're making them make decisions. And whereas now I feel like I'm taking a step back from one of the roles and giving the reins to someone else, which is pretty interesting. uh Something kind of foreign to me, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, it's an interesting process. And yeah, I think that's my main thought of just going doing this whole session today. It's just, oh, like there's so many like different, because before, it's like when I'm making the comic myself, it's like, all right, I want this to happen, I want the character to do this, and the story demands it like this. But now you're thinking as you're creating a rule set for other people to make decisions in this world, instead of, like, that's, I guess that's my main takeaway. And as far as like other, like, next time, shit, man, I don't know. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a good. So next time would be a good place to end. Is what do we want to do? I mean, sometimes with these design charrettes, so design, showing off something and talking about where it could go. You want to sort of arrive with basically giving yourself homework. I think
Yeah,
So I'm not going to give you homework, but I'm going to suggest things that either one or both of us could do. Like for example, characters. So you could start with what kinds of characters do you feel would be fun to play, or would do you want to bring to life? And I do think there's those fundamental things to think about, like are they specific? Is it the dog unnamed from Hazmat, or is it just a
a
beast, a
dog.
dog?
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe it's not even a dog. Maybe it's a cat. I don't know. Is it Hazmat or is it a survivalist? I mean, again, you could see it either way, actually. Because these characters don't have names and backstories in the comic, or we get the backstories as glimpses. There's like
yeah.
one flashback, maybe, we
There's like a
know a
couple, but
little,
yeah.
yeah, but so
Like, now that you're saying this, I'm almost thinking like Hazmat is not a playable character. You're playing as anybody else, and Hazmat
he's out
drives the
there,
world. Yeah, he drives
yeah.
the world and he's there, but you're some survivalist person. You're some dog. You're some mutant. You might run into him and then might fuck your day up. But
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. He
like,
could be more of a bad guy in that sense, not
like,
like evil necessarily. Is just like
well, it
it
depends
wouldn't
on who you are, right?
depends who
Like,
you are, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's an interesting thing. So maybe thinking about characters and a little more around what you want from them, maybe scores, attributes, or what are things characters have. One of the
yeah,
things Vex has brought up, working backwards from aesthetics. So Vex is suggesting, what about things you want as artifacts of play? What visual impressions you want things to have? So think of interpreting that a couple different ways. One might be, are you like writing or drawing stuff that you have at the end? So again, that idea of a map or journal. But
Mm.
another might be for me as a GM. I think often in games I'm describing. Often it's called spamming in speculative fiction. Like you're spamming the world with details,
Yeah.
and you're just like you have to make shit up constantly. You're like, yeah, the spaceship hallway. Of course, I know what the spaceship hallways in the far future will look like. You just make stuff up. So I
Yeah.
think maybe there's also a question of the aesthetics of like how to draw your comic, but in the game, is someone imagining it? Like, are they using visual props? Are they imagining their own version? And is it going to be pretty different? That's where I was going with color way
Mm.
back. Was if you imagine someone hasn't read your comic much, they've seen maybe the zine, the game has imagery from you, obviously,
Yeah.
but they kind of don't know the comic, but they know post-apocalyptic fiction. They know the world in that sense. What are ways to cue up in their mind some of the same things that you draw in the comic? So then they do read the comic, like, oh yeah, I totally get that, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's different ways to do that. You talked about like literally giving them imagery, like cards or something, but there's also again writing evocative descriptions or just scenarios, like putting them in scenarios that happen in the comic, but again, out of order. It's not Hazmat's life; it's someone else's journey through this
Yeah.
wilderness. And what are the themes? And something we didn't really hit on, but maybe something to think about for next time. Also, are themes. Do you want this to feel heroic at all, or even is there hope or possibility? This is something you could argue, I guess, in a literature class about like the road, right? Like, is it
Mm.
hopeful or is it just like, dog, that shit is sad? Um, I mean, I would say Mad Max similarly. Like, I think it's meant to be hopeful. It's an action movie sort of franchise, but it's also got a
Yeah.
lot of despair and just people who give up. And so, I think there's something to the theming. Vex also saying giving factions or biomes, different color palettes. So I do
Yeah,
think there's
for
things you could do
sure.
with game design where you could take
Yeah.
this kind of palette and break it up into a book, and you would know kind of different character types based on the colors, different
Yeah.
powers, items, how useful they are. Um,
Yeah, I'm inclined to keep it visual, like instead of like writing out the scenarios because the comic is so visual and there's no text. Like things are coming in, like scenarios coming as like images, and you're imagining, oh, I'm in that place, and
yeah,
like I'm using that object, and like instead of like, oh, I'm in this cave, and the GM describes it, and I don't know, it's kind of goes away from the comic, like I
well,
like
if you want to do a very, very visual game, I think the hardest part then is it is kind of homework for you, which is you would need to
yeah,
break up your world, not just whatever we've seen so far, but any imagery you have into lots and lots of
elements, yeah,
elements.
yeah,
Now, a tarot deck has what, 72, 78 cards, something like that. It doesn't have an infinite, but I think you would need on that order, right? You would probably need more than like 20, more like closer to 100 things to then pull out.
yeah.
Um,
It'd be fun to do.
yeah,
I
yeah.
like it. Yeah,
So that might be something fun, and then that might be
yeah,
closer to board game design. In that in the future we might be prototyping, meaning you'd be holding up pieces of paper you'd cut out with, you know what I mean? You'd have to print them, or I'd have to
yeah.
print them, and so that's a little different than sometimes we talk about these things coming from the theater of the mind tradition, where yeah, the GM
Mm,
describes stuff,
yeah, yeah.
maybe rolls on tables, whatever. But in that sense, you're not using visuals as much. Today's games are more and more visual. People use what are called virtual tabletops. They make little tokens on a map and they move their
Oh yeah,
guys around. So that again, you could imagine actually designing for a virtual tabletop is another option that we didn't
that'd be
even
crazy.
get into. So we can talk offline about this, but Tony, think about things you
Yeah,
want to do. I definitely think as a challenge, if you want to make it very visual, what are the key visuals? Like even
yeah.
examples, just a couple. And I definitely think characters. I think there's something there. It seems like we're all excited about playing a fucking dog and playing a mutant who's just a mutant who's like, I'm just born. This is my
Yeah, yeah.
world. It's Tuesday.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that's any last thoughts from the chat. Otherwise, I think we're gonna bid everyone adieu, and I'll let Tony get back to being a working artist out there.
Yeah. I think that covers it. Like I'm gonna start. I'm definitely start thinking about just I guess elements, characters, the world, and even just like the goal, of like what the game is culminating towards, and
Yeah.
once we have like a very concrete endpoint, then everything else can kind of build off of that. And yeah, so yeah, I think that's all I got.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll talk more. We have another couple of these scheduled. Actually, before we go, I'll just announce
Next
the
one's like
dates.
March something. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
I think we said we did one a month, and then we can always do more. I mean, March we
yeah,
have a couple cool. We have a special Why We Roll miniseries kind of stream happening. But the next HAZMAT live game design stream is going to be March 16th, so Monday, March 16th, same time, 8
awesome.
o'clock Eastern. And then there's a third that we scheduled for April 27th. So we'll put those dates out. But March 16th, April 27th, both Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have Tony Chao, amazing illustrator. We're going to talk about HAZMAT. If people like this, we'll do some more. But those are at least days that we put aside to just get together and talk through what you could do with games, right? So thanks to everyone in the chat. We have such amazing people
Yeah,
with great
thank you for
ideas.
dropping in. Yeah,
Yeah, hell yeah. And thanks, Tony, for sharing your time and your art with us. Everyone, go check out. Remind us of your Instagram handle, Tony Chao
it's
Illustration, or
it's the Rio Chowman. That's my Instagram. TheRealChao Man. It used to be the Chowman, and then I got hacked, and I had to remake it. Like,
gotta
yeah,
unhack yourself. Yeah,
I know.
so follow the real Chow Man on Instagram and check out
Yeah,
TonyChowIllustrations.com.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we'll be back with more. So think about what kind of dogs you want to play in your next RPG. Thanks everyone. Have a good night. Thanks, Tony.
Later, guys.